back of the rim. Garnett on the slam. Oh, using Curry way downtown. Oh, what a shot from Curry.
Imagine that it's the beginning of the 2001 NBA season. Travels aren't widely accepted yet. It's not some anomaly when contending teams only have one or two All-Stars, and there's no real discussion about who the GOAT is at the moment because as far as we all know, he just retired. But before he did, there was this kid ushering a new culture into the league. This lightning fast, barely 6-foot kid who was so fast in fact, that he's managed to cross the GOAT himself. He's clearly got next. But in this particular summer of 2000, he's about to be traded in a move that will send shockwaves through the future of the NBA. Yet it doesn't end up happening for one of the oddest, most unexpected reasons. It's not because he can't shoot, by the way. Jump Shot Trainer is the basketball training equipment that allows you to practice your shot without interference from the non-shooting hand. With it, you'll be able to practice the same technique that professional basketball players use on a daily basis. Jump Shot Trainer promises to help you improve your shooting percentage within 30 days or your money back guaranteed. For more information, visit jumpshottrainer.com with the link in the comment section or the description. Allen Iverson was drafted in the year 1996, defying quite a few odds. After being thrown in jail over a brawl at a bowling alley, he very well could have went on to been one of those guys that just never made it due to unfortunate circumstances. But thanks to coach John Thompson being convinced to give him a chance afterwards, he eventually made it to the NBA draft. And then there's Pat Croce, an executive of the Sixers at the time. He was a huge Iverson fan and possibly the biggest reason they took the risk of drafting him. And by extension, he also played a huge part in dealing with all the shit that ended up coming with him. See, the beginning of Iverson's career was far from all sunshine and flowers despite what the highlights might show. And while it's true that he was already leading the league in scoring by 1999 in just his third professional season, he was also butting heads with newly minted coach Larry Brown, who took over in the 98 season. The main problem was that Iverson and Brown basically existed on completely opposite ends of the basketball spectrum. One guy believed in scoring by any means necessary, and the other believed in total team basketball. It's pretty clear who lands where in that scenario. The other issue was that Iverson had plenty of extracurricular activity going on in his life outside of basketball. The kind of activity that caused him to show up late to practice, or to just not show up at all, usually accompanied by some excuse to Coach Brown as to why he couldn't be there. On top of that, his headbutting with Larry Brown was furious. There's stories of Sixer practices where the team would overhear Iverson and Brown screaming at each other in the office as team management tried to get them to work out their differences. Iverson wanted Brown to be fired and Brown wanted Iverson traded. Brown would tell Iverson he needed to pass the ball. Iverson would tell the team that they should have drafted Muggsy Bogues if that's what they wanted. Then he'd go on to mock Coach Brown in the shoot-around by passing the ball instead of shooting it while yelling, "Hey look, I'm Muggsy Bogues." Brown would bench him during games when he wasn't tired or in foul trouble, and Iverson would drop an F-bomb his way on the journey to the bench. Those stories come from the worst part of their relationship though. And they did eventually agree to get past it to where they could have a working relationship. That culminated in the year 2000 where the Sixers had their best season since drafting Iverson, where they won 49 games. However, before that season had even ended, the last straw leading to his trade had already been pulled. In March of 2000, Iverson, after agreeing to work out his relationship with Brown, missed a practice on a road trip in Miami. He was hungover after hardcore partying to the point that he couldn't even get out of bed, which led to a one-game suspension and the Sixers losing that game to the Heat 92-77. But the fallout from that event was the important part, and it was major both short and long term. In the short term, Iverson and Sixers management went back and forth. Iverson reported feeling betrayed, saying that he thought he had a better relationship with the organization and that he didn't think the suspension was fair. He also added, quote, "You think I'm going to come to Miami from freezing Philly and not go out? I know how to take care of my body. I'm not a little kid. I go out and come in when I want to." Larry Brown said that there was a lot more to this event than just a missed practice though. "I've let it go too far. It's just the culmination of a lot of things," he finished. But the upsetting part about the timing of this blunder was that the loss caused Philly to drop 5.5 games behind the Heat for first place in their division, whereas winning that game could have closed the gap just a little bit that late in the season. So that year ended, the Sixers were a second round out, and Philly decided that they were officially done with Iverson. They'd done their absolute best to put up with his antics, his attitude, the clashing with Brown, the disruptions with the team, and now it was just all over. Pat Croce, the man who'd stuck his neck out to take such a risk by even drafting Iverson, and who'd used basically all of his pull to convince Brown to keep putting up with the issues, again personally called Iverson to deliver the bad news. In June of 2000, he reached out to let him know that he was on the trading block, an event that changed everything from that moment on, and had the potential to flip NBA history on its head. At that moment, Iverson poured his heart out to Croce, probably because he told him that Los Angeles was one of the places they were trying to send him, and I don't mean the Lakers. In light of that, Iverson vowed to become a changed man. He exclaimed his love for Philadelphia and how he was planning to marry his girlfriend, the fact that he was only 25 years old and most people who came from his town didn't live to see that many years. He did everything short of crying to change Croce's mind. And although he got off the phone without promising Iverson anything, the truth was that back in the office with Larry Brown and GM Billy King, they'd already struck a massive deal. The deal was to be centered around 4 or 5 teams, and the important parts were that Iverson and center Matt Geiger would be sent to the Detroit Pistons, and going to the Sixers would be Glenn Rice, Eddie Jones, and Jerome Williams. The deal was done, and Allen Iverson, about 8 years before it actually happened, was the newest member and the new face of the Detroit Pistons. Mind you that at the time, Detroit had barely even begun to take shape of the title team they would become 4 years later. As a matter of fact, the only piece of that eventual core that played for the 2001 Pistons was Ben Wallace, and they went on to win 32 games with Jerry Stackhouse as their all-star that year. But wait, this trade never happened. Yes, one of the 2000's largest icons stayed put in Philly for another 6 seasons. Why, you ask? Matt Geiger, a player a lot of you have probably never heard of. A player that participated in 39 more NBA games after this trade proposal. A player whose name I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing correctly. Yes, he's the reason that NBA history looks totally different today. How, you ask? Turns out that in his contract, he had a 15% trade kicker installed, meaning in the event that he was traded, he'd get a $3.3 million pay raise. Problem was, unless he waived that kicker, the Pistons wouldn't be able to fit him under the salary cap, therefore nixing the entire trade. Now, I don't think there's a lot of NBA players in general that would have sacrificed $3 million to be traded to Detroit, much less in the early 2000s when they were bad and wearing those terrible jerseys. So a major trade still went down, but Philly wasn't a part of it and they retained AI. The good news was that near-death experience totally changed Iverson for the upcoming season. He came into that year with a totally new attitude, reinvigorated work ethic, showed up on time before practice and stayed late. He was the real deal. Before this, Iverson wasn't even training properly in the summers and lifting weights. You know, regular things professional basketball players do. No, for the most part, he just had it like that. He was blessed with the talents of an all-time great. So when he started accepting the coaching and tips from management on how to take his game to another level, it was like Frieza training for the first time in Dragon Ball Super. Yeah, that's how we ended up with 2001 Allen Iverson. His league-high average of 31 points per game, which at the time was a career high, his league-high average of 2.5 steals, his lone MVP award, the 56-win season, which still to this day is the most games that the Sixers have won since then, the NBA Finals run, and the improbable Game 1 against the undefeated Kobe and Shaq Lakers. It was truly a dream season, and all things considered, the most successful of Iverson's young career. But of course that didn't last. He wound up going back to his old ways, was eventually late to a playoff game, and that was the end of Larry Brown coaching him. Now that's oversimplifying it, of course, mainly because that's not the route we're going in this video. The last part is dedicated to, what if that trade had have gone down? Can you imagine how NBA history changes? Let's reach a bit. Immediately, the 2001 NBA Finals probably would have involved the Bucks and Lakers, which, by the way, is at least a little bit interesting when you consider that LA didn't beat them that season. Probably didn't mean anything, but maybe they would have matched up better than Philly did. What about the MVP season? A lot of MVPs have to do with team performance, and the Sixers performed beautifully that year with their new additions. Does Iverson retire with an MVP at all if he's leading a poor Detroit team while having a less than stellar morale? Oh, speaking of Detroit, what becomes of them for the 2000s? The 2004 core that they built went on to every Eastern Conference Finals until 08. Do they still build the same way around Iverson? Does their draft choice change in 2003 considering they now have Iverson? I highly doubt that they ever make the finals with him at the helm because he's probably less than happy to have been traded there, and definitely doesn't buy into the same type of team ball that took them to the finals in 04. And if the Pistons aren't in the 04 finals to upset the Lakers, then who is? Do Kobe and Shaq win their 4th NBA championship together? Does Kobe then go through with his free agent threats to help push Shaq out so he can lead his own team? Maybe that still happens because Kobe made it clear he had something to prove, but it's still difficult to imagine he feels that way after winning a 4th title. If Kobe doesn't do that, does Shaq not end up in Miami helping D-Wade capture his first NBA title? And now I'm just having fun. To be honest, this whole thing probably stops with Kobe, cause he said plenty of times like win or lose, he was gone. Or Kobe and Shaq was over cause he just said he was not going to play in his shadow, so one way or the other, Shaq probably still leaves. Seriously, there's an infinite number of possibilities in the NBA when talking about any trade or free agency signing, and that's what makes it so fun. But on a serious note, for a split second, everything we know about today's NBA was set on a totally different path with Iverson headed to Detroit. And considering how his attitude helped stifle his career while toiling away in Philadelphia, who knows how it would have gone with him being traded against his will to some place he didn't care to be. I don't know. Anyways, thank you Matt Geiger. I could not imagine life without a clip of Iverson stepping over Tyronn Lue, and we owe that all to you, so man, he's really like some type of NBA overlord when you think of it that way. I don't know, whatever. That is how one of NBA history's biggest trades never happened.